Okay, I take your point. Professor Swaran Singh, you heard Ambassador and Imtiaz Gul as well. I want to understand, do you see what's happening right now as a failure of Pakistan's Afghan policy? And also, when we talk about TTP menace, who do we really have to blame at this point?
I think that's true because Taliban was originally a creation of Pakistan, particularly Pakistan military, to be specific, ISI. And therefore, if Taliban 2.0 has had constant problems resulting in rather violent skirmishes on the border, and now allegations or even airstrikes, I would agree with you that it can be described as failure of Pakistan's Afghan policy. Second, Durand Line has in history often been questioned by several uh, uh, Afghan leaders successively. And again, Taliban in last 4+ years doesn't recognize Durand Line, which they believe cuts Pashtuns from the middle. But right now it seems the concern is about TTP, and Pakistan is describing the Afghanistan Taliban being responsible for giving sanctuaries and support, and not holding them or reining in. And in that sense, that is seen as a trigger. But there are bigger, structural forces which is making this violence much more dangerous. To me, more recently, the kind of cultivation and pampering that President Trump is doing to Pakistan military emboldens Pakistan military to push its way the way it wants to sort of re-earn its prestige, because repeatedly we have seen how Pakistani military has been treated in Balochistan, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and now also in the so-called occupied Kashmir area. And they need to urgently work on ensuring their credibility and prestige. Similarly, recently Taliban has received much better recognition. Russia has not just recognized but also exchanged ambassadors. We hear that China, Uzbekistan, Indonesia, several countries, including India now, are doing de facto interactions. India is talking of starting an air corridor, expanding trade. So therefore, you hear the Foreign Minister Muttaqi warning Pakistan to learn from history and learn from British, from Soviet Union, Russia, and now from United States as to anyone who's tried to use force against Pakistan has had enormous problems and had to retreat ultimately. So that emboldened new attitude of Taliban also, I think, is partly responsible for a problem which is deeper, persistent, long term, has not always resulted in that kind of enormous violence the way it is seen right now. And I think it's that kind of international structural forces which are, I think, pushing both sides to show that one-upmanship in that sense. And of course, it could also be related to their domestic constituencies. Taliban needs to also assert itself internally, given that there are factions, there are challenging outfits, etc. Same as Pakistan. So both internal domestic constituencies and international forces together, I think, are creating a situation where both are fighting on the border, but primarily led by ensuring their own credibility and legitimacy in terms of being the rulers both in
All
Pakistan
right,
and in
Professor Singh.
Afghanistan.
So you say that the knee-jerk reaction we are now witnessing is not the way out. Professor Swaran Singh, India has a lot of interest in Afghanistan in terms of connectivity projects, in terms of infrastructure projects. And at the time when we're seeing India and Afghanistan try to deepen their ties on every front, how is India monitoring the situation along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border?
Very clearly, India has very deep strategic interests involved in ensuring access and indeed partnership with Afghanistan. Indeed, in 1990s and early 2000s, Afghanistan became an example of India's enormous amount of investments of infrastructure on the ground. A lot of that infrastructure is still in the process of being built. Some of that needs to be revived, some of that needs to be repaired. Several new initiatives were announced during the two foreign ministers meeting in New Delhi. specifics of various health centers to be built in various provinces, ambulances to be given, cooperation in sports and culture, and so on. So India is really becoming proactive in exploring and building partnership with the Taliban. I think there is definitely an element of India's concern about balancing the China-Pakistan jointmanship in keeping India out of not just engaging but also exploring various solutions to situations in Taliban-ruled Afghanistan. So I think there is a again international scenario which impacts India's interest in Afghanistan. The fact that recently President Trump lifted the waiver on sanctions for India's investments in Taliban. So in that sense, there are multiple ways which make India really look forward to building strong relationship with Afghanistan as much as possible. But as far as the conflict is concerned, I think it's not going to sustain for too long because drivers on both sides are very much limited to ensuring regime credibility. And once both sides feel that they are comfortable in terms of their stature at home and abroad, or let's say when militaries feel the fatigue, I understand Taliban is, in terms of technological edge, is on a back foot. Pakistan has an advantage. But remember, Taliban has also been a sort of war fighting for last 2 decades against United States. So even if the terrain on Durand Line may be very complex and difficult, Taliban has a credibility of having pushed United States out ultimately after 20 years, and they have that not just experience but confidence. So both have their own advantages, but why I say that this violence may not constantly escalate and prolong is simply because I don't think they are seriously fighting to recast the borders. The
And
drivers are very much.
just bringing in Mr. Gul at this point. Mr. Gul,